Mark Rogers TV, setting our sights on some positional breakdowns around the ACC. We look at Georgia Tech and the quarterback position that, of course, asks a much different type of player and a different role from that position than just about anywhere across the country. Of course, if we're talking Georgia Tech, it's Joey Weaver time from the Rumble seat. Joey, we always appreciate the breakdown. Justin Thomas is a guy that if you watch college football, you become accustomed to in the last several years. He is a gray beard of a veteran at this point, going into that last season in Atlanta. Took a tumble in regards to statistical production last year. We can read off the numbers, but knowing what happened with the offensive line and the loss of your two best receivers from the previous season, your thoughts about Justin Thomas last year and what he needs to do to improve his play coming into that final season?
Yep. So I wrote an article before the season started where I talked about how we had a very unique opportunity with last season. We spend a lot of time in football and college football, especially talking about the importance of quarterbacks. And if you get your quarterback to come back from one season to the next, usually that indicates some sort of benefit in your results. And I talked about how we had the quarterback coming back from 2014, but pretty much nobody around him. You were losing the two deep on A-backs and B-backs all around him. You lost two receivers to the NFL, and you lost one offensive lineman. And so it was, well, let's see. Is it all about the quarterback, or does it have something to do with the guys around him? And it turns out it does. Thomas obviously struggled in 2015, both passing the ball and later in the season with just executing the option. I think he ended up losing confidence in the players around him and in himself even at times, where it felt like there were reads that he was pretty obviously missing for the sake of himself, probably trying to do too much, probably trying to force things. And so it's going to be really important moving towards 2016 as some of these freshmen turn into sophomores, as some of the older guys return from injury, things like this, for Justin Thomas to kind of regain that confidence and trust his teammates around him so that he's making the right reads, putting his players in position to succeed, which is something that he did a fantastic job of in 2014. With passing the ball, it's going to be paramount, like you talked about, with the offensive line. In 2015, he had nothing that even really resembled pass protection. The number of times that he couldn't even get to the top of a 5 or 7 step drop without having to scramble and eventually throw the ball away, it kind of became maddening after a while. So he needs a little bit of help and some protection, a little bit of time to throw. He's got the ability. He needs receivers that will go up and get the ball. I think he's got those. Talk about guys like Ricky June, even freshmen like Brad Stewart last year, Harlan Howell coming back this year. But that's really the two biggest things that he needs. Is he needs to be confident in making the right reads regardless of who that involves in the option game. And then passing the ball, he just needs a little bit of time and needs a little bit of confidence to make sure that he's doing the right thing and getting the ball to the right guy without just being flushed and having to panic right off the bat.
Yeah, in an era where we see dozens and dozens of quarterbacks across the country completing 65 to 68% of their passes, but at the same time, much of that being padded by 4 and 5 yard passes in the flat, bubble screens, all that sort of thing. We placed a lot of value for those people that really watched Georgia Tech football 2 years ago on Justin Thomas completing like 51, 52% of his passes because they were meaningful plays down the field. He dropped down to less than 42% this past year. And in the running game at 3.4 yards per carry, obviously sack yardage factors into that as well, but not nearly the impact player throwing or passing this past season that he was last year, totaling just 19 touchdowns combined. The talk of camp, Joey, Taquan Marshall, the 67th rated athlete, according to ESPN, when he came out of high school in 2015. What can you tell us about this kid?
Yeah, so he played last year as a true freshman at A-back at that slot back position and did fairly well. I think had some injury concerns around the middle of the year and ended up missing most of the end of the year. But there were kind of some comments made throughout by Coach Johnson talking about, well, he's an A-back, but we're not so sure he's not a quarterback. And they tried him there in spring practice after a couple other positional changes, and it turns out he is. It seems like through spring camp and then the spring game on Saturday, it seems like he's taken over that second backup quarterback role away from Matthew Jordan, who kind of filled in last year. Jordan's still a guy that they want to get on the field. He's a little bit of a different type of player. He's a bigger, more powerful runner, a little bigger frame, so might have some usage in short yardage situations, fourth down and short, talk about it getting up next to the goal line. But Marshall very much kind of cut in the same mold as Thomas. Smaller frame, only 5'10", 5'11", somewhere between 170, 180, 185. Similar quickness, maybe not quite the same top-end speed as Thomas. What we saw on Saturday was a guy who has some flashes in the passing game, but still needs to have some improvements throughout the day or throughout his season. He had probably one of the best passes of the day outside of Thomas's touchdown pass. He threw a pass on the money to a wide open receiver down the field who then dropped the ball. So can't really fault him too much for that. But it looks like Taquan Marshall might be, as of now, kind of the plan moving forward as a second-string quarterback. You've got two other true freshmen starting out this fall, Jay Jones and Lucas Johnson, who could also end up factoring in. But as Coach Johnson has done with a lot of his true freshman quarterbacks, chances are that at least one, if not both of them, will end up redshirting, at least for this fall.
Yeah, Marshall with some effective yardage on the ground against some quality competition last year. Notre Dame, Duke, Pitt, 14-yard run against them. Usually the 1 or 2 yards or 1 or 2 carries per game there early in the ACC schedule. You mentioned Matthew Jordan hitting on 5 of 9 with a touchdown pass last year. All right, the quarterback breakdown in the book. This is the first of many for the positional breakdowns right here on Mark Rogers TV, Joey. So you are usually at the forefront, and yet once again at the forefront of our coverage here. So we appreciate the breakdown, Joey.
You bet. Looking forward to the rest of them.